Good afternoon, everyone. It's Rich Sutter in the zone with Pete Coles, MV Pete and Pistol Pete. Rocking and rolling today at 9:28. This is show number 24. It's absolutely amazing. 24 shows. Pete hasn't quit on me yet. So it's really been a great experience, really going well.
You've been awesome. I've learned so much about basketball by doing these shows with you. Like
Well-
just listening to you talk.
And to be honest, I've learned a lot about the media business from you as well, because when you tie the whole thing together, what you know and what I know, it makes perfect sense what we're talking about here on the show.
Yep.
So it's been absolutely cool. Just wanted to start off the show today with a little rest in peace moment in the Feed 'em Fish section. James Bailey was a great player for Rutgers back in the day. When I was growing up, that Rutgers team, I believe, coached by Tom Young, might have been undefeated during the season. I don't think they won the national title, but they had a young man on their team named Jammin' James Bailey. I had the opportunity to watch him play when I was younger, and he was an absolute great basketball player, and he was an explosive 6'9" forward that could get off the floor and dunk, and just really, really a skilled, excellent player, and he passed away last week. I wanted to start off this segment to the Rutgers fans, to everybody. James Bailey was a great player, great person, and we hope that he may rest in peace. So also right off the get today, we've been bantering back and forth, as much of the basketball world has, about some of the trading action that's been talked about in the NBA. And so today, finally, we have some blockbuster action, really, to report going down in the NBA. And it's about the aforementioned and much talked about Damian Lillard, who was a member of the Portland Trail Blazers. And with their draft pick of Scoot Henderson, it seemed imminent that they would trade him. I didn't understand that thinking personally, because I think him and Henderson could be an absolute dynamic backcourt, which lends into some of the stuff that used to happen in the game of basketball a little bit better. I think it happens on the collegiate level a little bit better than the pro level, but that mentorship program where you had an 11-year veteran bringing in a mercurial, talented new freshman starter, maybe possibly coming into the Blazers, and I thought they would have been some backcourt together if they could have coexisted. And I think that they certainly could have, because from what I've seen from Henderson, he doesn't have a problem sharing the ball, and Lillard is the high-volume guy. Lillard is the high-volume guy who requires the ball a lot. So let's talk about the trade a little bit. There's some of it that makes me scratch my head a little bit, but in the NBA, sometimes you don't always see the smoke and the fire at the same time, because sometimes the trades that are involved in this, the components of the trade, sometimes you sit there and you think, wow, what are they doing that for? And a lot of times, much like the Wizards did earlier in the year, a lot of times it's just to get rid of some salary cap room, to clear up some stuff so you can bring in some free agents and sign some new players. So sometimes you don't see those machinations behind the scenes, but
So
sometimes that's what's happening.
Not always about chemistry.
Not always. Not always, especially in the NBA. I don't know if they care too much about chemistry in the NBA. I think they should care about it more, but I don't think they do. All right, so Damian Lillard was finally traded. He was not traded to the Miami Heat, as was much anticipated, much talked about, and Jimmy Butler is even on social media and some other places right now saying that the Bucks should be investigated during this time for tampering with Mr. Lillard. And I'd love to hear the full story on that one, but he was on social media saying that they should possibly be investigated for tampering. This is a situation where there were 3 teams involved. This is what I really love about the NBA. Sometimes trades go up straight up between 1 and 2 teams. Sometimes they triangulate. Sometimes there's more than 3 teams involved in some of these trades. I like the 3-team wheel kind of a little bit more than I like the 2-team, but I think sometimes more than 3 gets a little crazy. So here we're going to dissect it a little bit for you, tell you exactly what happened, and then kind of grade it out, and we'll tell you, we think, who did well and probably who hurt themselves a little bit. You can't have always winners and winners in trades. There's no such thing, in my opinion. You're going to have winners and you're going to have losers. And so let's look at it. Let's see what happened. Go through it. And again, as we said, it's a 3-team trade. So the Bucks were the team that were involved in this, and this is the play that Jimmy Butler says should be investigated. The Bucks came out pretty much out of the bushes on this one because they hadn't really been mentioned as one of the teams that kind of was talking to Lillard, and it really had been the Heat most of the time that they were talking about. And I think what happened with the Heat was they didn't want to give up the core of their team to bring in one player.
Sure.
I didn't want to, as you alluded to, Pete, their chemistry, they have pretty good team chemistry. Some of the team chemistry they have is a result of having some superstar players like Butler, but they also have complementary players on that team who weren't drafted. Probably understand that they're complementary players, and that lends a little bit more towards chemistry. When you have a bunch of stars in the room and everybody wants to get paid and everybody wants to lead the league in scoring, chemistry becomes an issue there. Chemistry becomes a problem. So let's pick up the trade. Let's see how they did it. But the Bucks picked up Damian Lillard. Now, Damian Lillard is a superstar in the NBA, but he is a lot like James Harden in my respect, although he passes the ball better than Harden does. But he has to have dominance with the ball. He has to have the ball in his area a great bit. I don't know how that fits in with the rest of the Bucks lineup, which is pretty solid. You remember, you do have Giannis Antetokounmpo in that lineup. So how this all fits together out in Dallas, they put Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic together and thought that would have great chemistry, and it has not. Right. It has not materialized. Doncic was actually on social media today talking about how they're working on that. And so I thought that was a really interesting comment by him as well, that they were working on chemistry, because it's not something that just shows up naturally all the time.
Are they being nice because it's Kyrie involved in it?
I think he's trying to put a positive spin on having a guy that got dropped into his locker room maybe that he didn't want to have there. And so he's trying to put a positive spin on it, because they do have to coexist for 82 games or 64 or 56, whatever.
Player management.
Whatever that load management decides to be. We know it won't. We know what number it won't be, Pete. It won't be 82. We know what number it won't be. Okay, so the Phoenix Suns were involved in this, and the Blazers. So the Phoenix Suns are kind of the triangulated team, and the Blazers had Lillard. They're moving him to the Bucks. And then Phoenix came involved, and I really don't understand why they got involved in this. Okay? So they picked up an international player, 7-footer, Nurkic. Okay. They picked up Grayson Allen from Duke, Mr. Dirty, okay, known for more cheap shots than anybody in the history of the NCAA, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. That's who they're getting out of this. Phoenix sends to the Blazers DeAndre Ayton. The Bucks send to the Blazers Jrue Holiday. And they also sent recently drafted Toumani Camara. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, why did Phoenix get involved in this? Why would they, unless they're dumping, cap room? I think DeAndre Ayton's one of the best young big men in the game right now. I think they might have had some fit and some chemistry issues. Honestly, I don't think he got the ball enough in that lineup, and I thought that might have been some of the contention there. But Kamara's a rookie. It's probably just a throw-in piece of the trade. But I don't understand what Phoenix is doing in this trade. I really don't. They picked up a bunch of guys. Nurkic is 13, and a decent rebounder. He's a 7-footer. Also passes the ball pretty well for a big man. But the other three guys are really Grayson Allen, and the other guys really aren't. Could somebody
have had the international rights to that player, and maybe that's why?
I don't think that really matters, but possibly. Now, let's go back to Lillard for a moment here. He is 33 years old. He has been in the Portland Trailblazers organization for 11 years. His numbers last year were absolutely off the charts. He averaged 32 points a game, and he averaged almost 8 assists a game. That's staggering 1-2 punch right there, because a lot of guys that score the ball don't assist with the ball. A lot of guys that assist the ball don't always score the ball. When you have somebody that can do both, that's pretty staggering number, the two numbers that he put up last year. Again, but let's go back to my previous point of that's an awful lot of ball control. That's an awful lot of you holding on to the basketball. And now you have Antetokounmpo, you have Middleton, you have Lopez in that lineup. You have some other good players in that lineup. I was really surprised that they, I guess it was no way to make the deal without including Jrue Holiday, but that's a big loss for the Bucks. That's a big loss for the Bucks. So basically you're trading Lillard for Jrue, and there's going to be some parts of that are positive, but there's also going to be some parts of it that are negative. Jrue Holiday, you talk about team chemistry. He played with those guys for a really long time. He also is a bigger guard than Lillard and handles better defensive assignments, in my opinion. And so I'm interested to see how that goes. Interested to see how it all plays out. But again, 11 seasons. He was a 7-time All-Star, a 7-time All-NBA player. And so that's pretty astonishing as well, too. That's a really good record. He leaves Portland first in points, first in three-pointers, and second in assists all time. So he's first in points, first in three-pointers made, and he's second in assists. Those are three pretty significant areas to be involved in that organization. To hold two of those three records is pretty significant. As he moves on, he's 33 years old, though. I think what you're looking at from the Bucks is perhaps the perspective of let's try and fix this immediately right now and make that run. Because if you look at the prognosticators, if you look at the people who set gambling lines for this, they know what they're doing. They're not in this business to lose money. So if you ever wanted to look and get a really good understanding of what they're thinking, they just moved the Bucks up number one. They just moved the Bucks ahead of the Celtics in the Eastern Conference to number one. So they think this is a good trade. They think this is a good thing. They think it makes a big difference. They had moved Boston up to the top by virtue of the Porzingis trade with Smart. I guess they thought that was a good trade, so they moved them up. But I think at the end of the day, I'm going to sit this one out and wait a little bit. I don't think there's something
that they're not telling you, or
no, I just don't think that there was a great value in this because you might have upset your chemistry.
Okay.
You brought in a guy who thinks he's the best player in the game, in Lillard, because he shoots the ball all the time. And he plays with the best player in the game, now, Antetokounmpo. So does that all work itself out? Because there are alpha situations in every locker room. And who's that alpha dog really, really matters. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the alpha dog in this locker room. Is Lillard going to be comfortable not being that guy where he was that guy all of those years in Portland? It's a different role. But maybe in order to win, he's ready to take on that role. Maybe to step onto this franchise where they have a really, really good chance to win the whole thing is really exciting to him, and it was worth the trade-off. I don't know. But if that doesn't go, it's just like Kyrie Irving coming into the Dallas Mavericks locker room. Everybody thought that would work. Everybody was like, wow, look at this. They just added a superstar guard. It didn't work because the chemistry wasn't there. It didn't work because the trust and the time and all of the things that go into building chemistry weren't there as well. And so you just can't make it in the laboratory. It comes over time a lot of times.
Well, and it's also the people, too. Kyrie's not known as being a kind of a team player.
It's interesting to see how he's kind of devolved, in my opinion, as an NBA player. Could have been one of the greats, certainly of this generation. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure when you'd have to really sit down and look at it, in the whole totality of things, because he's statistically an impressive player, but seemingly when you're on a lot of teams in the NBA, that's generally a sign. It's generally a marker that you wear out your welcome fairly quickly.
Yep.
And that's something, that's interesting to see, because you look at players and you'd say, wow, what would they trade that guy for? Why would anybody have ever traded Kyrie Irving? Why did the Nets trade Harden, Irving, and Durant in the same year? When it's not working, it's not working.
Yep.
So you got to clean it out. But again, this is what I'm saying about the Bucks thing is when I say I'm going to sit it out. I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm not saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think giving up Holiday is significant. And so, you're bringing in Lillard, you're bringing in Holiday. At the end of the day, I think that's, they're both very good players. They're both very good players. And so I guess the Bucks felt like, because they also fired their coach too. They also fired their coach recently too. The guy had a pretty good record. They were in the finals, just a bit before, but amnesia wins the day in the NBA. People don't remember anything in the NBA. What you did for them the other day, that's just what have you done for me lately is the day. So, under 40 days for the start of the college basketball season, Pete. Very, very exciting to everybody. Really, really pumped up myself about it. I think it's going to be a great season all the way around. And I'm just really excited about all of it. I love the basketball season. I love the college basketball frame. Early now, we're going to go into it in October, where a lot of the Division I teams have just started to practice. And I'm giving that they just started.
The wink,
to
wink,
practice.
nod.
We're winking, we're nodding, we're blinking and nodding. We're doing all of that stuff because we know that. Some of the young men, they're involved in some pretty significant workouts, a little different than what they're, what's going on in the NBA and in the NCAA. And I really, really don't think that there's a lot of people that are going to get the understanding that some of the stuff that happened, for example, with Bronny James, happened in just a small combine workout, where they weren't playing full court, they weren't going up and down a little bit. Obviously, I don't have any inside information on that one, but I think some of these teams have pushed the envelope with that for a long time. That's not a secret in our business. Okay, going back to Bronny James, USC did practice for the first time, and he was not able to make their first practice. I'm not sure what the future holds there, but we'll see. Mikey Williams, Memphis Tigers, was not with the team just recently. He is involved in a gun charge right now and has been away from the team. Shame, because the young man has an absolute tremendous talent for basketball, and to get caught up in this stuff this early on is not positive, not good. Hope it all turns out well. Jerome Tang of Kansas State just recently signed a new contract, which takes him into the year 29-30. So Jerome Tang has a great job he did with Kansas State last year, and their recruiting and just everything they've been doing up there in Kansas. I think they're doing a great job, and they rewarded him with a contract. Let me explain why this is significant. When you go out all the way to 29-30, that makes it really difficult to fire you, because they're going to have to pay you the millions of dollars for all of those years.
That's a big chunk of change.
Probably what saved Jeff Capel in Pittsburgh is because of the length of the contract. Why the length of the contract is like that is because this is what they say, and this is malarkey, but it's said all over the place. We'll get negative recruited against if I don't have a contract that lasts as long as the freshman class's time at the college. So in estimation, and of course this was hatched by basketball coaches, and it's genius if you buy into it, but it really says that I need 4 years all the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a contract that rolls over with 4 years on it at all times. Otherwise, we'll get negative recruited. And a lot of these ADs out there right now, they're signing on to some of these really, really significant deals. And the long years of the contract, and again, Jerome Tang's done a great job at Kansas State. They've taken that program to a level that it hasn't seen in maybe ever, But at the end of the day, there are things that happen in college basketball. There are things that go on in college basketball, and at the rate and the speed at which those things can go right and can go wrong are really, really rapid. And so what you have to do is limit liability for the university. And when you stretch out to 29-30 on a contract in the year 2023, you're talking about 7 years at $3 million a pop, $4 million a pop. That's $28 million that would be in the buyout. So if something really goes wrong, like it did in Texas, like it did in some of these other places, now you have to fire your coach for cause, and that's not good. And when you fire your coach for cause, that lets you out of all of the obligations of that, which is a lot of times, which I think why you're seeing, and I'll give you a little conspiracy
Talk about
theory
negative
here.
recruiting, though.
Talk about the negative side of that. But I'll give you, this is what used to have to happen. If you wanted to get rid of your coach with a lot of years for cause, you used to have to go to the NCAA and turn yourself in.
Oh, okay.
And so say, hey, we're cheating.
Yep.
We found all of this going on. Now we're going to get out of this contract. But at that same time, you'd be taking a hit.
Right.
What I think is the new conspiracy thing is if they want to get rid of the coach, they're going to do it in a way that's not related to the basketball program. So when the guy Beard from Texas goes home and domestic abuses his live-in girlfriend, that's off the charts. They can fire him for cause without any harm coming to that basketball program.
Yep.
So as soon as they knew they wanted to get rid of him, they found the reason to get rid of him. Bang, there it went. And so they were not.
Or they already had it in their pocket. They knew about it. They swept it under the rug, and boom! Now it comes out.
And what if they knew about it before they hired him?
Right.
What if
That's
this occurred somewhere else? So this is what you're talking about here in all of these scenarios. And so now you're looking at this side and you're saying, wow, how do you limit the liability for the university here? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons you do that is you shorten up the length of these contracts. Stop listening to your coaches that say, I got to have 4 years, otherwise we'll get negative recruited against. Negative recruitment is dead. Let's just put that out there.
With the NIL, I don't see how
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Negative recruitment is dead. The only negative recruitment that goes on right now is they can't pay you.
Right.
That's the only negative recruitment that goes on right now is they can't pay our number.
Yeah.
That's the only negative recruitment that goes on right now. We walked everybody through it with Hunter Dickinson. He went out for his first visit, got an offer from school 1, goes to offer 2, and now to go to 3. You come to your 3rd visit and you say, this is what I have on the table. I hope you guys can beat this offer. It's very, very much corporate right now. Very, very much business. What I wanted to do, but congratulations to Coach Tang. Congratulations to Coach Tang. What I wanted to do with the remainder of the show was to look into recruiting a little bit. I wanted to look into some of the action, what we've been talking about here with ESPN Top 100. What I did was I started out and I grabbed 2024 and I went through it and I wanted to see exactly what's happening in the game today. Who's really lighting it up on the recruiting trail? NIL or no NIL, you have to assume that all of these top schools have similar amounts of money. Now, you have to say, is the game now apportionment? Okay, you paid this guy $2 million, but we got this guy for $1 million. And so that let us get 2 players at $1 million each, and you wasted $2 million on this guy who's terrible, isn't going to work out, and isn't going to pan out. So I think that's what's going to happen with the NIL now is you're going to be measuring more. It's going to be, it's like I posted on Twitter the other day. I said, are there any more ways to gauge high-level assistant coaches as far as who's doing a great job recruiting out there? That's how a lot of these young men became head coaches. They made their bones on the recruiting trail. They made their bones at signing great players for the schools that they were at, and then the schools that were looking at them to be head coach said, "You're sure we want to bring him in. He just signed A, B, and C," and he brought them into that school. So that certainly matters, but that metric is now out the window.
Right.
Nobody's going to know who's good or bad. It's just who has the most money, who's apportioning their money in the right way, and who can refill their coffers. Also, because now you're looking at, okay, we're out of money. We're school A. We've extended every single NIL dollar that we've come up with. Now we get a chance to sign this really great player. We don't have a scholarship, so we're going to get around that with the NIL because the young man can pay his own way now. We'll take care of that. We'll pay the tuition on the side. There'll be a bag of money on the side for the tuition. Don't worry about that. But then they got to go now find more money. Now they got to get out there and find more money. And now they're going to be slowed down because they got to find the money while School B says, we still have ours. we still have $1 million for you right here. That school's going to fish around. They won't. I don't even know how you can. It's like a bank account.
When are they going to start calling it the minor leagues? Seriously.
10 years ago.
Good Lord.
And the thing is it's like is the NIL like a bank account? Like, I can't write a check that doesn't have the money in the bank on it. The check will bounce.
Right.
Can they make an offer to somebody without having that requisite money on site? Without having that money right there to say, here it is, this is how we're going to account for this? Or is this thing moving so fast that they don't have any way to account for it, and they just keep going to the same people saying, we need our budget, our payroll? It's just like in the NBA. You're saying it's the minor leagues. It's exactly what it's built on.
I'm saying. If you're a player, you tell them caveat emptor.
Right, and of course. And after all of those years, why not? But again, my issue is the school's not paying. They're going outside externally. This isn't coming out of their TV contract money. This isn't coming out of the Big Ten contract. This isn't coming out of the Big 12 contract.
They're shuffling money.
This money's coming from people who own really big companies who used to go to the school. They were called boosters in the old days. Now they're legalized boosters. Now they can just sit there with one person. Let's just take Bill Gates. I don't even know where he went to college. Thank God, maybe he didn't go to college. Okay, but Bill Gates takes an interest in Georgetown. All of a sudden now, Georgetown says our payroll went from $5 million to $6 million. No problem. We've got billions on hand. $6 million, no problem. St. John's has connections to their people. North Carolina, Duke, they have all their connections to their people.
This is like legalized racketeering.
I think you'd like to see, where's the money? Where'd it come from? Okay, so before we jump into 2024, though, and talk about some of the great players that are coming up and who they've signed with already, I wanted to go back. So ESPN is a great resource online. I'll recommend that to anybody. And there's another resource if you're a college basketball junkie. I have yet to get mine yet, but I will get it very soon, is the Almanac by Jeff Goodman. Another really good piece put out by Goodman, but this thing is comprehensive. If you're a college basketball fan, you got to get the Almanac because this thing's really good. I've seen it in the past, and I'm really excited to get mine this year. I think it's going to help our show and enhance our show. But ESPN is also doing a great job. What I love about ESPN is they do a great job with the recruiting stuff. They put out their top 100 list. They put out their top 100 list for next year. For 2025, it's already out. For 2026, there's lists out. So they have lists of everybody. They have lists of people, who's the best of the best right now in high school. Who's the best player in high school regardless of class? They have all these really cool lists. ESPN, I think, does a really, really great job online. But what I wanted to do was go back as far as I could in their database, and I took the earliest class that I could find that they still have online, and it was 2007. And I wanted to go through some of the names because what I wanted to see here is, okay, ESPN says you are the #1 player in the country. Where are you now? What happened to you? Did it metric out? And we'll be able to see that in the I have 21, 22, 23, and 24 here, but I went all the way back to 2007 because I thought it'd be interesting. The #1 player in the class of 2007 was Kevin Love, who has played many, many years in the NBA. Probably wasn't a first-round draft pick, but he was a very high draft pick. So ESPN, you would say on that metric, pretty good. Not bad. They picked him #1 player in the country as high school. He went to college, filled out his college career, and then entered the NBA. I got to believe he's been in the NBA for at least – he played with LeBron James in Cleveland.
Yeah.
So I got to believe he's been in the NBA for 12 or 14 years.
Yep,
easy.
good career, yeah.
Had a very, very solid career. Let me tell you something else, too. His uncle is Mike Love of the Beach Boys.
No kidding.
Uncle's Mike Love from the Beach Boys. Nice little tidbit there. Okay, the #2 player in that class was Eric Gordon. He was a great player as well, too. Some of these names are really gonna kick up some dust here. O.J. Mayo. Number 3. Number 4, Kyle Singler. He went to Duke and had no pro career, never amassed anything. He was a number 5 player in the country. Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is listed here from Chicago, Illinois, signed with Memphis, and that was one of the reasons that Memphis vacated their Final Four back in the day with Coach Calipari. And some of the stuff that got jammed up that way, I'm pretty sure. But he was picked very highly here. He's had a great pro career. Mm-hmm. He's had really a lot of injuries recently, but early on he had a very, very good pro career. Nolan Smith, Austin Freeman, Michael Beasley. Michael Beasley was one of the guys that started a little bit of the whole thing. Bob Huggins was the head coach. There's an old name for us. Bob Huggins was the head coach at Kansas State. And Michael Beasley's AAU coach was a gentleman who was probably didn't have a college degree, which was back in the day was the norm. All the assistant coaches in NCAA had to have a college degree. And when they brought in Michael Beasley, they signed his AAU coach, and he didn't. I'm pretty sure he didn't have a college degree, and his salary was somewhere in the $400,000 range. So what it started was assistant coaches coming up through the ranks without really going through the formalities that they used to go through because they had access to players. And that's where I think it damaged the game a little bit. It cut down on the pool of up-and-coming coaches, and it put coaches out on the floor with great players that didn't really belong there. You know, just because you have 6 basketballs in a minivan doesn't mean you're ready to go onto the basketball floor of a highly trained Division I, Power 5 basketball program and have an impact. Obviously, Michael Beasley, I guess you could go back and ask those guys whether it was worth it. Patrick Patterson, Nick Calathes, some names that were pretty good in college, you know, and did some good things. But, again, we're seeing a lot of misses here. Seeing a lot of misses as far as the pros. Corey Fisher from Villanova. Nope. Costa Koufos from Ohio State. Cole Aldrich. James Hickson. Corey Stokes. Taylor King. Deontay Green. You can see a lot of these guys didn't play in the NBA. A lot of these guys never made it to the pros.
Yep.
Here's an interesting one at 18. Blake Griffin was signed out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma. He's one of the greatest athletes to play basketball, in my opinion. One of the best athletes ever. Doesn't shoot the basketball very well, a little bit like Shaquille O'Neal there, but one of the great athletes of all time. Jai Lucas, Etuan Moore, James Harden was in this class. Shooting guard from California, signed with Arizona State out of high school. Gani Lawell, Johnny Flynn from Syracuse. I thought he'd be a decent pro, but never really materialized. He was 23rd. James Anderson, DeAndre Jordan's been in the pros a real long time. Center, again, you can't teach 7 foot. Chris Wright, Austin Dave, Alex Legion. Tough to read some of this. Anthony Randolph, LSU, decent pro career. Keep on going down the line here. Herbie Pope signed with Seton Hall, New Mexico State. Not a lot there. Not a lot of great names in the pros that you would see. I'll take one more look here, and then we're going to jump into 2024 and go. Jeff Robinson, he had a decent career. Looking down here, John Diebler from Ohio State. His father was a great high school coach out in the Midwest. He would shoot 1,000 shots. This is for all you young guys out there who think that you're ballers and you actually think that you really work really hard. John Diebler would shoot 1,000 shots before every single game.
Wow.
He would get in the gym and shoot 1,000 shots before the game. He didn't make the pros, though. Didn't make it as a good pro. Okay, so Chandler Parsons, as you go down here, there's not a lot of guys that not a lot of names. Not a lot of names. And part of what somebody said to me the other day was, is the NBA really trending more towards Europe? And it was a kind of a sly comment that he made because he's a basketball guy, goes way back. For years and years and years, we've been involved, myself, him, all of the other coaches that are involved in coaching, we're involved in trying to get our players to go to Europe. If they don't make the NBA, trying to get them to go to Europe. For years and years and years, Europe has had a cap on the amount of Americans that they would allow on the team. So normally it would be 3. I talked to a friend of mine who involved in Australian basketball over there, and now they're at 2. So does the NBA soon come to that measure where, in order to protect American players, the NBA will now have to place a limit on the amount of international players that are coming in? Because when we say international, we're talking the entire world.
But they're making money in the entire world, especially from China.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. That's the question. Will the NBA ever do that? The European clubs had no problem putting that out and telling people, hey, we got 2, we'll let you have 3, but that's it. And those were very, very rigidly enforced. If you went through the NBA rosters right now, Pete, do you think there'd be more than 2 on almost every single roster?
Oh, yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
And
you hear about it.
And again, you're saying international when you're saying the rest of the world outside the United States.
Correct, yeah.
But it is called the National Basketball Association for a reason. And as much as
how many players from other parts of the world are entering through the U.S. collegiate system?
A lot.
That's what I'm saying.
A lot. But probably it would have to be because the number of players going into the collegiate system is larger than going into the NBA. So if you did it by percentage, that would be very interesting to me.
Okay.
Because there's more players obviously going into NCAA basketball, most likely internationally. You see it Division II, Division III. You see it all over the place. So that's probably that level of it where it's going in at a much higher number. But is it going in at a higher percentage? Because the NBA is obviously a much smaller cohort. So if it was done in percentages, I'd be really interested to see how that goes. Really, really interested. All right, so let's talk about this now. Duke just received a commitment from a young man, I can't even say his name, Knuppel, Kneuppel, something like that. He's listed as one of the top players in the country in this class. That gives them 3 of the top 25 players in the country right now. Cooper Flagg, the young man from Maine who's doing a postgraduate year or finishing up. I'm not even sure if it's a postgraduate year for him. He's down at the IMG Academy in Florida. He's doing some work down there. I think he's in the process right now of doing his 3 visits. UConn is he has a fairly significant list of schools, but really how you'll know if the young man is gauging significant interest is if they're going to commit one of their 5 official visits to that school. So you can have a list of 20 schools, but you're only going to visit 5, and you're going to visit your best 5. And so when you take Cooper Flagg right now and say it's down to 3 visits, UConn was one of them. The problem UConn had is their football team got absolutely throttled over the weekend while he was there by one of the other teams that's recruiting him, which is the Duke Blue Devils. So you can't always plan everything out on a visit because the young man is going to set the schedule and you're going to take Cooper Flagg whenever he wants to come to your campus. So he has other visits set up. He only has 3 visits set up right now. UConn was one of them. He's going to visit Duke as well. And I'm not sure who the other 3rd school is, but it might be Kansas. And that'll be really interesting. Apparently Duke is in the lead. If they sign Cooper Flagg with Knuppel and the other players that they have, the rest of the ACC is about ready to go into hyperdrive the wrong way. The rest of the ACC is not going to be able to compete. We've said this many times with it on the floor. So you have also Dylan Harper is the number 2 player in the class. This is Ron Harper's relative. And the real exciting thing for Rutgers fans is that they have a real good shot at the number 2 player in the country right now. The word on the street, he hasn't committed yet, but the word on the street is that he's leaning very heavily towards Rutgers. And if that happens, Rutgers signs a number 2 player in the country, that's going to do significant things for Coach Peichel's program down in Rutgers. It's also going to do some significant things for New Jersey basketball because his dad was a great player. This young man is a really good player as well. So I think that's interesting. If Rutgers can hold on and get him, I think it's going to be really, really good. I think they're in the lead right now. I think they're going to get him. There's a couple of other names here that are exciting, but Kansas has signed Flory Badungo, and he's one of the best in the class. He's a big man. He's a center. And what you're going to see from Bill Self is you go back all the way through with all of the big men that he's had. The young man who plays for the Heat. They've got a lot of good big men in the NBA, and they've always had good big men because they're a 4-out operation with a low post, and this young man, Badunga, is going to fit right into that low post stuff. He's really, really talented and can do some stuff. Isaiah Evans is the other player that Duke signed in this class. Very, very talented young man. He's from North Carolina, so you had a little bit of a battle down there between North Carolina and them, and Duke's just really doing really well right now. Carter Bryant is signed with Arizona. He's a 6'8" kid, really, really talented. That's a good get for Arizona. Their recruiting hasn't been the same since this new operation took over, but we'll see if they can gain their footing. Liam McNeely's a really exciting player in this class as well, listed 13th. I think he's going to really do some exciting things. He's out doing his visits as well right now. You're going to see an early commitment period come here in November, and we'll be all over that. But you're going to have a really large portion of this top 100 will be gone already. Good news for Tar Heel fans. They've signed 2 good players in this early period. They've signed the 16th and the 13th best player in this period. And I think that's going to help them because they're just trying to maintain right now.
Yeah.
What Duke is doing is really just blowing the smoke off of everything out there in the ACC. They're really dominant in recruitment right now. And they've been dominant as a basketball program for many, many years. North Carolina, that's the standard. That Duke-Carolina basketball game is the basketball standard for, I can't tell you the last time I missed a Duke-Carolina game. I can't tell you the last time I didn't watch that game. And that's the standard for basketball. So Carolina is going to have a real difficult time maintaining that standard because the last thing that Tar Heel fans want to see is every single time that they line up against Duke, they're getting pounded. They're getting pounded. They don't want to see that. That's something that'll drive them crazy. It's funny how things work in this is why I said the rivalries were so important. Imagine if North Carolina decided to leave the ACC. Imagine what would happen. The Duke-North Carolina rivalry becomes insignificant.
Yep.
Imagine if Michigan or Ohio State decided to leave the Big Ten. That rivalry, one of the great rivalries, becomes insignificant. Auburn and Alabama, one of the great rivalries of all time in football in the South, both in the same conference. They play at the same level. That game, people have been divorced over that game. The Auburn-Alabama game. People have filed divorce because one was Auburn and the other was Alabama and said they could not reconcile their differences. So this is what we're talking about with that. That's what brings the excitement. That's what brings everything together. And we're not advocating for people to divorce because of their sports differences, but that certainly brings the level up.
It brings ad revenue in, too.
And then it becomes, unfortunately, I think for Coach Davis down in North Carolina, I pray not because he's a great young man and was a great player and would love to see him do well with the program down there. But they're going to kind of point the finger at him. When Shire took over, same situation. Neither one of them had coached before, but they're really, really knocking it out of the park at Duke, and Carolina's taking a step back. I don't know how that all works, but these 2 signings that we just talked about will really, really be helpful. But again, Duke's just keeps on going. If they get Cooper Flagg, it's going to eradicate most of what happened with all of their action in Carolina is going on. It's going to be very, very difficult to stay with them. It's going to be very, very difficult to keep up with Duke. All right, so that's 2024. Let's go into 2020, and then we'll move forward because it's interesting to see that we have – I'm just going to go through the top 10 of each one of these, and we'll see how they did and how they mapped out. Okay, Jalen Green was the #1 player out of Fresno, California. Back, very, 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 very solid career. Cade Cunningham, went to Oklahoma State, played there. I'm pretty sure he was the number 1 pick by the Detroit Pistons back in the day. So he was the number 2 player in the country and wound up getting drafted very, very high. Evan Mobley, one of the Mobley twins out of California, was the 3rd player in that draft. He was also a very high draft pick. His twin brother, no, he's not his twin brother, his older brother or younger brother. One of the they have 2 brothers in there. I thought they were twins, but I'm not sure. I can't vouch to that, and I don't want to get myself in trouble here. But they both are in the NBA right now, both doing pretty well. Jonathan Kuminga, one of the gentlemen who wound up going into the G League, coming out. He's somewhat very highly rated, but it hasn't equated in the NBA. Has not happened in the NBA for him. Scotty Barnes, number 5 in the country. This is a young man whose game I was very, very high on. I was happy to see the Cavaliers draft him where he was, and he hasn't disappointed. I would say Scotty Barnes probably finished 2nd or 3rd in the Rookie of the Year voting that year. So I think that's pretty good. That's a good way to do it. Jalen Suggs, who wound up going to Gonzaga. I think he's had a mixed pro career so far. I don't think there's a whole lot of Gonzaga people that are doing outstanding. B.J. Boston signed with Kentucky, hasn't really materialized into a great college player really or into a great pro player. Zaire Williams was just drafted out of Stanford. That's pretty good. Greg Brown was from Texas, also recently drafted. And Terrence Clark from Kentucky. He's in the NBA right now doing okay. Just looking at some of the other quick names here. Walker Kessler is listed 14th. He was signed with North Carolina before transferring out. And I think that I would have him in my top 5 as far as having a good sophomore year this year in the NBA. He's a guy, it was really, really strange because, and again, some of this could have to do with a lot of the change that was going on, but you rarely ever see anybody transfer out of North Carolina. And you don't see anybody transfer from Carolina to Auburn. It just doesn't happen that much, you know? And this was one that was interesting because it's not like he was benched at North Carolina. It's not like he was a guy that wasn't, doing well there, starting, playing a lot, getting into the lineup. It wasn't the case at all. So it had to be somewhat of a personality issue. So let's jump into 2022. We've got 2023 here as well, so we'll take a look. Number 1 player in the class of 2022 is Derek Lively, signed with Duke, and I want to say he was somewhere in the 12, 13, 14 range this year, maybe 10, drafted this year. So that's pretty good. Number 1 player in the country. Again, for Duke, you're looking at this and you're saying they got the number 1 player in the country. They're going to get the number 1 player in the country again. And you're looking through this and saying, wow, it's easy to see why they're as successful as they are. It all starts with recruiting. A friend of mine told me this about recruiting, made a lot of sense to me. He said, recruiting is like breathing. You have to do it every day in order to live, in order to survive. And I think at Duke, they got that message. Number 2 player in the class was Dariq Whitehead, and he just signed recently, went into the NBA, left after a bit of time there. I thought it was a little premature for him to leave, but guess where he had signed out of high school? He signed with the Duke Blue Devils as well. Nick Smith, number 3, Arkansas Razorbacks, getting himself into the NBA pretty solid. Dylan Mitchell of Texas, we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. Amari Bailey, UCLA, he's going to make it in the pros. I like him. I think he's going to do just fine. He might be with the Celtics right now. He might be looking at the Celtics organization. Keontae George, very high on this gentleman. Number 6 player in the high school pick, went into Baylor and did some really, really good things at Baylor, had an outstanding career at Baylor, and I'm pretty high on this gentleman as a guy who's going to have a good pro career. I like this guy a lot, and it's not because he went to Wilbraham and Munson locally, not because he's originally from New York, but Kyle Filipowski, again, now you're looking at Duke this year in 2022, signed the 1, 2, and 7th best player. Here's the funny thing. Filipowski's better than Lively or Whitehead. Filipowski's much better as a pro prospect, in my mind, than both Lively or Whitehead. I think Whitehead's going to struggle to make it in the NBA, and I'm not sure he's going to be on a roster all that many years. I think Lively has great defensive abilities, but he's going to struggle offensively. Filipowski is going to be a good player in the NBA, in my opinion. So they have Cadell Ware. He's at Oregon. Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller was 9th in the class and was drafted number 3 overall. Number 10, Jarace Walker. We talked about him a good bit in the draft. They had him being very, very high. Some people were very high on him. I wasn't as high. I guess some of the other NBA people weren't as high as on him. But he did pretty well for himself, coming out, did 1 year at Houston and come out. So these are some of the one-and-dones you're looking at as well here. Number 11 player in the class, Jordan Walsh. He was from Arkansas. Just recently drafted, the only player that the Celtics drafted this year is Jordan Walsh. I don't know that he makes their roster personally. Chris Livingston out of Kentucky. I think he was drafted this year. I think the jury's out on that. I don't think he ever played at Kentucky. I think he went in there, got hurt or something, or wasn't cleared, wound up sitting the year. I don't think he played. Jaden Phillips, 13th from Tennessee. Here's one for you, Pete. Grady Dick, 14th player in the country, and I want to say he was drafted 13th this year by the Raptors. He went to Kansas, and I want to say that he was drafted. Right below him, Anthony Black was drafted. He was a 15th player in the country, and he was drafted 8th by the Orlando Magic. Not bad. G.G. Jackson was 16th, and he dropped a little bit, way down into the first round, but still a first-round pick. Some of these other guys, Kason Wallace, 21. He was a first-round pick. And 22, Cam Whitmore. He was a first-round pick as well. So I think the 2022 class held up pretty well.
Yeah.
I think the 2022 class held up pretty well. Now, the 23 class is just coming into college right now. 23 class that we're going to talk about here is coming into college right now. Isaiah Collier was the number 1 player. He signed with USC. This is why they were as excited as they are in USC in Southern California about their basketball team, because with him and Bronny James, I thought they had added, wow. When you have Bronny James, you're going to add certain excitement around that. His dad plays for the Lakers. He's the best player in the NBA right now. He's going to be at some of your games. So he's going to add some excitement, And him having the heart issue but with Isaiah Collier and Bronny James, I thought, Coach had really put together a couple of pieces there that were going to make them national contenders. I think they're still okay. But I think that's going to be, it's going to be difficult, without him, I think, to maintain where I had them. Sure. I still have them in the top 25, but we'll have to see how Collier does, you know. And now you're going to look at, here's Kentucky. All right, Calipari's been struggling a little bit. I don't even know where they're picked in their SEC pool, but I don't think they're picked anywhere above 6th or 7th. And in Kentucky, that's like hair on fire position. That's like the world is ending position. That's like something has to be done position. Well, something was done, because Cal went out and got DJ Wagner, who is DeJuan Wagner's son, played and coached him out in New Jersey, and he was a great player for Louisville. And for him to sign with Kentucky is kind of a bad shot for Louisville, because their program's in disarray right now. And this young man has pro talent and has some scouts looking at him right now. So I don't think that you're going to see Louisville getting any players like that anytime soon, because it's going to be deleterious to their pro prospects. Let me give you the flip side of that, though. For anybody who has an unbelievable upside as a pro talent, go to Louisville, because you're going to get the ball every time down the floor. Every one of these guys right now that's going to Kentucky, and I'm going to talk about all 3 of them, they signed 3 of the top 6 players in the country in this class, much like Duke had done in the previous year. And they took, again, these guys are pretty close to each other in Jersey. They're both from Camden, and Camden's had been back in the day, was a hotbed of basketball. So they signed DJ Wagner. They have Aaron Bradshaw, who's a 7-footer, and with Justin Edwards from Philadelphia. Those are 3 of their players that are in the top 7, top 6 picks. And we'll see if they can resurrect their program a little bit like that. It didn't seem to show up in the preseason polls. It didn't seem to show up in the coaches' poll. So we'll be interested to see. Mackenzie Mubaka is the young man. When Kyle Filipowski announced that he was returning to Duke, that was kind of a casualty of the recruiting wars, is because this young man decided not to give through on his verbal commitment to Duke and wound up leaving and going to sign with Indiana. Good for Indiana because he's got big upside. And again, this young man might have just made one of the, because I was involved in recruiting a gentleman back in the day. And we were at a much lower school than the other schools we were recruiting against. As a matter of fact, we were way out of our league. But what I said to the young man in just some of the times that I was talking to him was, Duke has All-Americans all over the place. They have more McDonald's All-Americans than they know what to do with. And if you go to Duke, you're just going to be another one of their McDonald's All-Americans. And I think it resonated with the young man because he just didn't want to be in that kind of vein. Mgbako might have done himself some help here, because you go into that lineup at Duke, you might be coming off the bench. You might not be a starter, you know. And so I think sometimes, you know, my grandmother used to say, when the Lord closes the door, he opens the window. I think the window might have opened for Mr. Mgbako right there. I'm not sure. But then we go into Colorado, Baylor, Indiana, you know, from Mgbako, but go right back in. Jared McCain, number 10, going to Duke. Iowa State is featured in here. So you're seeing some of this NIL stuff occur right now, because normally those schools wouldn't be involved in the top 10. Iowa, a place like that, wouldn't be in the top 10. So I know the UConn fans are waiting and saying, well, where's our guy? Number 12. Number 12, they have Stephen Castle, 6'6", out of Georgia. And don't forget that they return a good portion of their team. I'm pretty high on the Huskies. If we really did this in an honest way, you know, because when we look to go to the top 25 in the country, everybody looks to Kansas and Duke, and they look to those programs, and it's kind of almost a fail-safe. It's almost like a bailout. Yeah, I'm going to pick Duke. I'm going to pick Kansas. In all reality, if we had really some better way of metricing in this, Florida Atlantic should be the best team in the country right now, and UConn should be in the top 2 or 3, because UConn's returning Klingon, Carabas. They're returning a real good core of their team that won the national title last year. And now they have this way of playing that's exciting as well. They have a playbook. A friend of mine sent me their playbook. It's unbelievable, their playbook. It's incredible, the amount of plays that they run, the ways that they have of getting their people open. When you see Sanogo getting that great look on the block, you go like, wow. You know, when you see their playbook, you go, oh, my God. You understand it at such a different level. And so I think UConn, if I was in their shoes out there in UConn Huskies, I'd be real excited about our position right now. I'd be very excited about our position right now. So as we kick off, Pete, I think we got about 2 minutes left.
Yep.
All right. I want to pivot out of that just a little bit. As we kick off the basketball season, there's a couple of things that I want to have you looking out for. All right? Number one is you're going to have some Cinderellas out there that are playing really good basketball and doing really good stuff. You're also going to have the power conferences, and what I want people to look at this year to see is what happened to the middle. What happened to the middle of college basketball? And I think you're going to see that Cinderella's about ready to go back to the basement. Cinderella's about ready to go back to the dungeon. Although we had FDU and we have some glimmers of that, I think what's going to happen here in the very near future is some of those automatic bids that all of the conferences have, the Atlantic 10, the MAC, some of the other ones, Northeast Conference, where FDU came out of, those bids are going away. Those bids are going to be absorbed into the power conference structure. And with all those teams, with all that money, Virginia doesn't want to lose to UMBC. Purdue doesn't want to lose to FDU anymore. And so the way that they're going to eliminate that, in my mind, is this is going to become 1AA just like football. Hey, we're out of time. We're going to have to go to 2 hours soon because this is just unbelievable. When the season starts, I don't know how we're going to keep this to an hour. But I want to thank all of our fans, all the people who watch us, and all of that great basketball family out there. You guys keep coming, and we'll keep going. Stay well, and we'll see you next week.